Today's edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online training library. Get a full free 10-day trial at lynda.com/macvoices. When you do, you get 240 hours to watch anything in lynda.com's over 4,000 title and counting collection of videos on everything from business to programming, video editing to Excel. Tech or non-tech, lynda.com has something for everyone, and you can sample it all with no restrictions for 10 full days by visiting lynda.com/macvoices right now. What are you waiting for? Thanks to lynda.com for their ongoing support of Mac Voices. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is Mac Voices, the talk of the Mac community. In fact, this is a Mac Voices briefing that is a bit of a different stripe. It's a cautionary tale of data loss and data recovery and everything that comes in between. First up, let me tell you that this is a story of mine. This all happened to me. Second, there's some villains in this story, there are some heroes in this story, there's even a jester in this story. And hopefully there's some lessons to be learned for you. Third, I want to make sure you understand that the products I mentioned, the services I mentioned, some have been on Mac Voices as sponsors, some have not. Some have been guests on Mac Voices, some have not. None of that really has anything to do with anything other than this is what I used, this is what I experienced, and I want to make sure that we're upfront on that. So, with that said, let's get into it. This is my Drobo 8-bay Drobo Pro. The Drobo Pro is this. It's got a little bit of age on it. In fact, it was end of lifed back in December of 2014. So an end of life basically means that it's out of service, no longer actively supported, no longer sold, no longer actively developed. Throughout this time, it's been flawless. I love it. I've upgraded it a number of times. I've had drives fail in it before, like drives fail in any device. But the great thing about the Drobo is, of course, I've been able to pop those out, slide a new good drive in, and it just keeps on working. So never had any problems with it, and it's been flawless. And I do own a number of Drobos, and just like them, never had any problems. And that's where the story starts. I decided to get a little more expansion space in the Drobo Pro, so I was going to upgrade one of the 2 terabyte drives to a 4 terabyte drive. Bought the 4 terabyte drive, popped the 2 terabyte drive out one morning before going to the office, put the new drive in, and my thought process was it'll grind over, during the day, get the data all transferred over, so it would either be completely finished by the time I got home or a large part of the way finished. And I went to the office, happy and no problems, expecting no issues, because there had never been any before. What I didn't know is that around 9 a.m., some bozo in the neighborhood who was digging during some new home construction cut the power cables, and my house went dark, including, of course, the Drobo. So when I got home, and the power came on sometime during the day as well. So when I got home that night, instead of finding my Drobo either with blinking yellow lights indicating it was still in progress or a line of green lights, I had a line of red lights. The Drobo disappeared from the desktop, couldn't get it to respond, tried restarts, tried a number of things from the online troubleshooting, no help. So I reached out to Drobo support, and they were absolutely fantastic. We exchanged emails. In fact, throughout this story, I have to tell you, I've completely lost track of how many emails that we exchanged. But eventually we determined that the Drobo could not be resurrected, that there was one drive in there that had been physically damaged, we thought. And keep in mind, too, now that's one drive full of data that was physically damaged. That other drive only was being processed by the Drobo for about an hour, if that, when the power cut came. Hence the problem. I should also point out at this point that this is where the jester comes into the story, because the jester's me. One feature that the Drobo Pro, along with most modern Drobos, has is a dual redundancy feature that allows you to recover from up to 2 hard drive failures, not just one, but 2. I had not turned that on the Drobo Pro. I had on some of my other Drobos, but for reasons that I can't explain, I had not on the Drobo Pro. So that was my fault. So anyway, back to the story. So the Drobo people recommended that we do a block level clone of the drive, and that there was a chance then that we could put the cloned drive in, and the Drobo would rebuild itself. Great. So I pulled out a couple of newer tech Voyager drive docks and a MacBook Pro, plugged them all in, put the bad drive in one, put the good drive in the other, and then tried to start a block level clone. Unfortunately, Data Rescue from Prosoft Engineering wouldn't see the bad drive. Techtool Pro from Micromat would not see the bad drive. In short, nothing I had would see the bad drive. I swapped drives in the Voyagers. I swapped the Voyagers around. I swapped MacBook Pros. I even swapped USB cables just in case, all with the same result. Could see the good drive fine, could not see the bad drive. So the next step, according to Drobo, was that I contact one of the professional data recovery houses, see if they could accomplish a block level clone for me. So they gave me a couple names, and of course the names that we all know, the big data recovery houses. Contacted the first one, and they said they don't work on Drobo drives or any NAS drives at all, period. They just don't. Okay, that one down. So went to the second one. They said, well, they would, but they would not clone just one drive. They wanted all the drives out of the Drobo, 8 drives to work on, and they felt there was a pretty good chance they could get the data back. The problem with that one was that the price quote they gave me had a comma in it. And the first number, I should say, was not 1, it wasn't even 2. And at that price, this is a little bit tough. So now I'm faced with losing all the data. Now I know somebody out there is going to say, yeah, you're always talking about backing up. Weren't you backed up? Yes and no. To my best estimate, there were a couple hundred gigs worth of data on there that had not been backed up that I probably could recreate from camera cards and different things. There was a lot of data, though. The way I used the Drobo, I use it to store ripped movies, ripped music, ripped TV shows, that kind of thing. So it's more of just a long-term storage device than anything. And as you can tell, I store a lot of things, raw video from CESs and NABs and all that. So I could recreate pretty much everything, but it was going to take a long time to do that. Think about your own DVD collection, CD collection, anything you have that you've ripped into your computer. I was going to be spending quite a number of weekends feeding little silver discs into a slot. Well, then Drobo gave me another option. They recommended $300 Data Rescue. So I contacted $300 Data Rescue and got a quote. The way their system works is this. The cost would be $400, not $300, because my drive was over 2 terabytes. I guess they got their domain name before 3 and 4 terabytes became popular. But it was going to be $400. If they could recover it to 99.99 to 100% recovery. If they could, then that's what I would pay. If it were any less than that, I had the option to either accept the clone with the best they could do and pay the $400, or pay nothing. They'd send the drives back and not cost me anything for the effort. So thinking about all those weekends of ripping discs again, I said fine. Sent them the drives. And then the waiting started. The process was completely transparent from a service perspective. They acknowledged when they got the drives. They told me when they were going into the cloning bay. They expected it to be 5-7 days in the cloning bay. Well, didn't quite turn out that way because the progress was so slow. We did determine there was physical damage to the drive, and that just slows things down a great deal. But we were seeing progress. You'd get a % or 2 or 3 a day. So it went on for about 5 weeks until it topped out at 96% and stayed at 96% for about 2 to 2.5 weeks. At that stage, we decided we're not going to get any more out of it. This is the best we can. So 96% in a Drobo, yeah, I'll take a shot at it and see what happens. So I paid the $400, got the drive sent back, put the drive back in the Drobo, held my breath, and powered it up. And I got a row of yellow lights. But the Drobo didn't seem to be doing anything. It was just sitting there. So back to Drobo support. Got some of the same techs that had helped me the first time around, and we tried a number of things. Something at that point I didn't know they recommended, and I didn't know I could do this with the Drobo, and that is I could rebuild the directory using Asloft's Disk Warrior. So at this stage, there's not a lot to lose. And I should say at this point too, it was interesting. The drive would not mount on the desktop. I couldn't see any files, but all the diagnostic files were saying all the data was in there. So ran Disk Warrior. It said, did its own little grinding of the directory and said, yes, we found some problems. We can fix them. Hit the button, held my breath again, and the drive reappeared on my desktop for the first time in 5 months. All the files were intact. Everything was perfect. The Drobo started, since it was back to what it should be, it started doing that repopulation of the newly inserted drive that I put in that morning. So in about 24 hours, it had completed the redistribution of data. Everything was fine. During that time, I did pull some files off that had not been backed up or that I felt were critical should anything go wrong, but it never did go wrong. The Drobo has been flawless since then. One of the first things I did, as you might imagine, was to turn on the dual disk redundancy, so this can't happen again. That's what happened. 5 months later, I got all the data back, which I was extremely pleased over. Yes, it cost me $400, but it saved me a bunch of weekends and nights doing all that re-ripping and recreating of data. So the heroes here, obviously Drobo, for their tech support and the way they handled it. And again, I lost track of how many emails over a 5-month period we exchanged. And I especially want to say a shout out to Brad D, and Val K, who were the techs and people at Drobo that helped me out in this situation. They were fantastic. They were patient, dealing with my paranoia over, are you sure this is something we should try? Because I don't want to just wipe out my data, just playing with things. Other heroes are, well, obviously Asloft Disk Warrior, because that fixed something that none of the other utilities could fix and brought the Drobo back completely the rest of the way from the dead. The people at that $300 data recovery, absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend them if you have a drive disaster of any kind. By all means, check out everybody, but definitely keep them in the mix. The villains, well, the villain is the bozo that cut the cable. I'd still like to find out who he was. Also, I guess Lady Luck for just having him cut the cable at that particular moment when it would cause physical damage to one of the drives in the Drobo. And of course, the jester me for not having that dual redundancy turned on. So we have some lessons and morals of the story. First, if you have a drive crash or a drive problem, don't panic. Don't do something stupid like trying to erase the drive, whether it's in a Drobo or not. Analyze the situation, look around, do a little bit of reading if you're not familiar with this kind of thing, and see what you can do. And by all means, reach out to the manufacturer because they know better than anybody what their capabilities can be. Number two, if you do have to go for a drive recovery service, before you start just accepting or rejecting prices, make sure you put what your own time is worth in. And I say that simply because $400 sounds like a lot of money, but depending on how I calculate my own rate of pay for an hour, it doesn't pay for that many hours of my time. So it was well worth it to me. Hopefully it would be to you too. Third thing, buy a Drobo. The Drobo, I would not have had these options with any other device. With its ability to heal itself a bit, yeah, it did have to have some help along the way under these extreme circumstances. But if I'd had any other device at 96.6% recovery, I would have lost files. I might have lost the whole drive, but I definitely would have lost files. And that, to me, says it all. I've never lost any data in a Drobo. I still have never lost any data in a Drobo, and it just gives me a huge amount of confidence. Not to mention the tech support backup that I got from them. Third, fourth, whatever, have some backups, especially of critical files. Technically, I had backups because I had a lot of the original media. Everything was stored on. It was just going to be very inconvenient to recover. So trying to figure out how to back up an 8-bay Drobo or something with that much data, and I don't think I mentioned this before, but we're talking about 11.3 terabytes or so of data that I had stored on that Drobo. So a lot of stuff there, a little bit difficult to back up. Figure out what's important to you. Figure out that in the event of a disaster you could stand to lose. But definitely have as many backups and as full backups as you can. Last, if you have a Drobo, definitely turn on dual disk redundancy right now. Don't stop the video. Go turn it on right now. Clear off some space if you have to, but turn it on. Because if I had that on, I might not have had this problem. Still might have, but there would have been probably a better chance it could have recovered all by itself without having to go any farther. Lastly, if you see somebody digging in the neighborhood, beware, because you never know what boneheaded move they might pull. So that's my story. I hope that you've learned a little bit from it. Hope it educated you a little bit. It was an interesting 5 months, but I'm pleased to say I got through it without losing any data, and that's the bottom line. So this is a MacVoices briefing with a happy ending. I'm Chuck Joyner. I'll be back with more soon on MacVoices. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.